Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, I guess, for the Americans, and probably good evening for somebody in the world. Welcome back to one of my monthly live streams, and I really hope that you can hear me right now because I have got a fancy new mic that should have made the sound much, much better. So please let me know in the comments how the sound is actually, because it's a bit of an upgrade. It's a bit of an upgrade. So today we are going to be tackling a massive and important topic, and it's so important that I have completely neglected to talk about it at all on my channel thus far. But you know, I'm the sort of perfectionist person that I want to get things right. I want to do them properly, and so I've been putting off doing something about work. And I just thought, no, I have to do something because it's a very important topic. It's especially topical at this moment because, well, for various reasons, but a lot of people have had their work situations changed. People are working more remotely. And so it's just a very interesting conversation. This is by no means going to be the only video that I do about autism and work. As I've said, I think it's very important. So in a couple of weeks, I'm actually going to have a video about the interview process and kind of interview tips, not just how autistic people can do better, but from the other side, how companies can do better as well. So I hope that you're into those topics. And if you have any suggestions for other really good topics around work and workplace environment for autistic people, please do let me know in the chat or in the comments or wherever. It's so nice to have so many of you joining me in the afternoon. You'll notice how energized I am, how I'm really, really not an evening person. So I'm hoping that I can mess around with the times without excluding too many people. It's really difficult, I know. So somebody says hello from Germany, I suppose. I mean, if you're from Germany, then I guess you are saying hello. We've got a hello from Australia, from Henlo. I assume that's what you meant by that, not hello. Cool. So it's really great to see you guys again. Autism and work, right? So you Google it. I mean, that's what I do for all my lives. I just Google, and you know what comes up first: the National Autistic Society statistics. Sorry. So basically, according to the studies that they've done, which they say have remained very static for years, they say only 16% of autistic adults are in full-time employment, and 32% of autistic adults are in some kind of paid work. Now, with all due respect, I think these figures are really on the low side. I appreciate that. I know autistic people are very underemployed and underused and just underappreciated in general. But I think that is very, very low, and I can't really find any information on who they polled. But obviously, if you ask certain people, maybe people who have been supported by the National Autistic Society all their lives, and then you poll them when they're adults, you might get different responses to asking people diagnosed in adulthood. So it's kind of a difficult starting point when you don't know the extent of the problem. So I looked up a couple of studies. There have been a few studies done on employment around autistic adults, and they're not really, really big ones, but there was a study done of 250 autistic adults that found around 60% were employed. And they also found that around those who disclosed their autism were 3 times more likely to be successful at finding employment, which is very interesting. And of course, that's fun for those of us in our 30s and older, because you can't, or those of us diagnosed in our 30s and older, because you can't disclose what you don't know. And underdiagnosis is obviously a real barrier, especially to minority groups, women and ethnic minorities who are also underdiagnosed. So I found another study from Germany that suggested around 68% were employed, and another one that looked at high-functioning autistics. These are their words, not mine, and they found, surprise, surprise, that we are overeducated and underemployed, which, yes, I probably could have told them, but they did a study. So they found, and these ones looking at the high-functioning adults, they found 58% unemployment rate, actually. So different studies are saying different things. We don't really have a wide-scale knowledge of the extent of the problem, but these are the things that we do know. We know that we struggle to enter the job market, and we know that we struggle to stay there. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I know it's a topic that's very important to our well-being and success in life, financial stability, our housing stability. So I don't just want to cover it today and then be done with it. And I hope that I can sort of collect some good information and provide some good resources for you guys. But much more pressingly, I have a special guest in the holding pen, someone I know personally, who is Naomi Johnson, who is an IT professional and works as a neurodiversity consultant. So let me just add Naomi to the chat. Let's hope this works. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Still positioning myself, but all good.
Positioning yourself, yeah.
Yeah, doing one of those.
We've had a little rearrangement, but I hope that I can hear you. So I hope that we will have all the tech stuff sorted out, and it's all going to go. It's all going to go well.
I guess the other question is, can everyone else hear me as well? Because we were debating whether everyone else could hear me.
I think if I can hear you, everyone can hear you.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah. So, would you like to introduce yourself? Because you work in IT and you're a neurodiversity consultant. That's all I know, actually. Could you introduce yourself a little bit better for my viewers, please?
Yeah. So, I mean, potted history is probably a good thing. I was only diagnosed at 37. I'm now 40, so I was diagnosed 3 years ago. I've been in IT for 20 years. I didn't do university. I didn't do A-levels. As you can imagine, undiagnosed autistic at school. It was, sorry, Green Intellectual, my audio is a bit unclear. I'm not sure I can do much about it. I'll try to speak slowly.
We were trying to. Just talk slowly and clearly. We were having some issues with the headphones.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, I was undiagnosed, so I went through school. I did my GCSEs. I didn't do A-levels, which is the exams at 16 to 18 for those not UK based. I didn't do university. I fell into IT somewhat randomly because I knew a bit about it, and a friend of a friend gave me a job. And then I've been there now 20 years, working my way through technically. I'm now in a leadership position, or I have been. So I was leading technical teams, running a company of the internal IT for 500 users. So I've been doing that for quite a long time. It's been a interesting journey over the last 3 years, because obviously getting my diagnosis whilst employed and trying to understand all of that, trying to understand myself more, has been very good, quite frankly. It's been good for my confidence. But then I've taken the opinion, especially because I've got a son who's autistic, I've taken the opinion that I should be very open about my autism. I should be very out there about it, which is part of the reason Sam and I know each other. And therefore, I have been doing talks about being autistic in the workplace. I've been doing stand-ups in front of people. Every time I go to any event for Microsoft or anybody else, I generally get involved in a conversation with somebody that starts off with the technical piece and talking about what I'm doing as a company, and then turning around and going, and I'm autistic, and waiting for them to go, who? So that's always fun. I enjoy that bit. Because as one of my slides says, what do you mean I don't look autistic? Were you expecting Dustin Hoffman? Trying to actually challenge people's opinions of what autism looks like is part of my fun, I guess, in life. I enjoy doing it. And then I enjoy talking about my favorite topic and explaining workplace practice and how things can be improved and how people can get into the workplace and everything else in between. So that's very potted history of me.
Very cool. Yeah, you're a very inspirational woman, I think, which is why I wanted to have you on the show.
So more honest and open and without a filter is probably a better way of describing it.
Yeah, well, you're in good company here. You're in good company. So let's just start by talking about being in the workplace and being autistic and what some of the struggles actually are. Why is the workplace as a whole a tough place for autistic people? And what are some of the common struggles that we face, not just in your industry, but just in any working environment?
I think it very much depends on the environment you're talking about to start with, because obviously I'm now working in autistic. I'm not autistic, I'm working in IT. Don't mind me. I spent the last 5 years in an office which has been fairly open plan, which obviously comes with a lot of sensory issues.
Yeah.
I've moved up into a leadership position where I therefore spent a lot of time having to have conversations that also involve conflict at times, which is not one of my strong points in life. I led a team, which means I'm learning about different people's communication styles and working on that for them. So it's been a very interesting challenge learning about myself and trying to ensure that I know who I am, because of course that's the last 3 years of trying to figure out actually the world's turned on its head. Now I know something else about myself.
Yeah.
But also then trying to educate people around me. So saying to them, if I wander off, I'm not just abandoning you guys to do your work yourselves. It's because actually I need some time away from desk right now because I'm overloading. Trying to ensure that I was making people aware that I'm autistic. And I think that's the hardest challenge for anybody, is educating their team, educating the people around them to understand who they are, why they do things in the way they do them. And actually the confidence levels you need, or the strength you need sometimes to actually be that open, is part of the challenge. And because I've been doing it now for 20 years, I'm confident enough in my technical ability and my ability to get a job that I'm now working on the principle when I apply for jobs, I tell them I'm autistic, because at the end of the day, if they don't want to know about that statement, then I don't want to work for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
but of course that's from in a position of
20
extreme...
years worth of
exactly.
That's 20 years worth of working, and therefore I do have an ability to do that to a certain extent. Whereas I know at the beginning of my career that would have been not a choice I could have taken necessarily. You know,
we just had a comment. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we've had a comment, which I think was something that we were talking about before, about, being in the workplace. So Catherine says, how do I get support at work while awaiting diagnosis? Meltdowns and sensory issues take up so much energy, and I feel I can't explain them to anyone without the safety net of a diagnosis. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think you need a diagnosis to a point. I think it depends on your workplace. That's obviously the first one. It depends on if you've got a HR team. It depends on if you've got an understanding boss. There's a whole host of question marks. I would say if you have somebody within the company that you trust and you can talk to openly, that's a good starting point, because they can act as your autistic wingman, for want of a better term, or wing person, and actually know that they are understanding what's going on with you. If you are struggling, they can cover for you or help you or understand how to help you. That would be a good starting point. Again, like I say, if you have a HR department, they do need to have it as conversation. They do need to understand. But it may be you get in contact with somebody like me, or you get in contact with somebody you can talk to locally in the area who can actually help you to explain it to them. Because I know 3 years ago, I know 3 years ago when I got diagnosed, and the first thing that happened was I went into HR and said, I've got my diagnosis. I know you knew I was getting it. And they said, what adaptions do you need? And I just sat there looking like a stunned fish, because of course I've just got my diagnosis. I have no freaking clue what adaptions I need right now. So if somebody, what sort of a person would they look for? Obviously somebody like you, you're called a neurodiversity consultant. Is that right? I mean, what are you typing to Google if you're looking for someone to help you? It depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. Because at the end of the day, everywhere I've looked so far, there is a autism support group or something of that ilk. Admittedly, there are some who are better than others and some who have very differing opinions to others. So it's finding one that has the right fit for you and the right expressions you want to use, and they understand that you want to use the term autistic as opposed to has autism, or whatever phraseology you want to be using, to make sure you're doing it your way.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they are acting as an advocate for you, because I had an issue at work where I actually used a neurotypical friend of mine as an advocate, but he and I had a lot of conversations about who I was, what happens in a conflict situation. I'm generally going to go non-verbal to a point, or agree with everything cheerfully when I don't necessarily agree with it. And he was there to support me in that and ensure that when I went like that, he would then step in and say, actually, we need a minute, or Naomi, do you think that's the right thing for you? Or do it that way, to actually ensure I've got a second voice when my voice is not necessarily as prominent as it should be.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't kick myself 2 days later for having processed it all, going, what was I thinking?
I just wanted to point out, because obviously we have an international kind of audience, a few people in the States saying in America, I'm just trying to find the comment, saying in America, basically, you don't have a diagnosis, you don't get any support. And obviously if you're unemployed, you won't be able to afford the money to get a diagnosis. So it's kind of like, so I just wanted to clarify that you work in the UK, don't you? With UK kind of law, well, employment law and stuff. So it's a little bit different in different countries.
Let me have a talk to some people I know over in the States, and if I could put some answers to that later on for you to put up to your followers. Just
I can change the description box
within the States on that side. Yeah.
Okay.
And it would just be quite interesting to get their opinion, or if there's a support out there that we're not aware of.
Yeah, that would be really great. Right. One thing I wanted to discuss was that there are a few places where they have initiatives to employ autistic people, which is great. I mean, a few places, not everywhere, but and a lot of these things say, autistic people are such great employees because, we have attention to detail, we're this, and this, and it's so positive. And do you think that that's just I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to be like, hey, autistic people are going to be so great, just employ them. But do you think that that's kind of, I don't know, narrative, or I don't know really what you'd call it, but do you think that kind of way of talking is damaging?
I don't know if it's
pigeonholing,
Yes, pigeonholing horribly. I think it's something I've been discussing with one of my mentors actually about this, because they have a recruitment agency, and it's trying to be honest about it, because at the end of the day, part of being autistic is being honest. Because we have to be honest about who we are. We have to be honest about the challenges we face, as well as how good we are at certain things or how we're not good at certain things. And I think I'm not a recruiter and I'm not a salesperson, as my non-filter will tell you. But I do think the recruiters need to be very good at being open about everything, because otherwise what's going to happen is it's not going to benefit them or the person being employed. I think it's very important to have a very open and honest dialogue. What's been interesting is there's been more of a move from varying places to allow mentors to go in and support both the company and the employee. So, for instance, Auticon, who are down in London, they're in varying places now. They employ autistic IT engineers as consultants for companies. They actually go in and they have the engineer themselves. They have a project manager for that engineer, and they have a mentor who supports both the company and the employee in helping the company understand how to work better with the employee, and how to then also help the employee understand if they're having any hiccups, or if they're having communication problems, or if they're having any issues, how to resolve them. And that's actually been really interesting. And I think any agency who's looking at placing not just autistic, but neurodiverse or anything else in between, neurodivergent people, it would be really good to have that extra thread to the company that actually has a longer term support over 6 months, over a year, however long it takes for that company to adapt and for that person to be able to be comfortable being open who they are. and giving them an extra voice if they need it, and actually being able to say to them, well, you don't, you know, if I'm having a problem, sometimes I don't even realize why I'm having that problem. And it's only through discussing it with my husband, for instance, and actually going over it, I suddenly go, oh, I know why I'm having that problem. It's because of X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you don't know the answer to any challenges you're having unless you have that conversation with somebody who understands more.
Exactly. Just going back to what you said before, somebody, maybe Voldemort. Oh my God. It's getting warm up here. I'm like, losing my mind. Maybe Voldemort says, if you get that sort of response to work, think about forming a neurodiversity group. I've helped run one at work and people didn't even know the word neurodiversity 12 months ago. Now everyone does. And I think that's such a good idea because especially if you work in a bigger company, the chances are there'll be autistic and ADHD people there. Like, so you won't be alone.
No, completely. And I think the other thing is localized networks as well. So, for instance, I'm friends with quite a few people within the area I'm in that we communicate on a regular basis. And I've been going to women in tech meetings, but now we're having neurodiversity meetings at times where we can all sit and discuss things. We can all have a conversation about varying topics, but we also then can use each other as almost mentor-mentees at times. To actually have that ability to sort of try and figure your way through problems and issues. And that's something we're working on at the moment. Is I went out to try and find myself a mentor a year ago. And I realized that I needed a very specific skill set in that I needed somebody who would understand me being autistic for my leadership mentor. And that's a more challenging thing to find. And it's something I've still been going over and I've been talking with some people about, is actually how to set up that kind of network for people to then be able to have a mentor. For instance, if you work in IT, you could get hold of me or you get hold of somebody else and have a weekly one-to-one or a monthly one-to-one or however often it needs to be. And I would give my time to somebody who was possibly further down the chain, junior within IT, for instance, who was diagnosed, and therefore help them and they, give them my advice. And similarly, I could have somebody who is more senior to me giving me advice simultaneously. And I think that would be a very good thing if you can reach out and talk to people. I mean, Sam and I talk in a group and we all support each other. And I think that's also very important at times.
Yeah, definitely having a support network because I haven't had like a sort of office job in, probably coming up to 8 years now. The last time I was employed was 2012 when I was back in the UK, actually. So it's only now looking back on that I realized just how exhausted I was all the time. And I just couldn't function. I was low functioning at that point. Like literally all I did was get through the work day and then just crash. So I'm well aware of how draining it can be. And, I was not diagnosed, but I was masking a lot. I was doing everything I could to fit in and be the person that I thought I was supposed to be. And obviously that kind of leads to burnout eventually. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of autistic people struggle to remain in employment, because the working conditions are not suitable. And then one thing leads to the other and we just can't function anymore. We can't do it. And people don't really understand that, I think. Have you had any experience personally with burnout or not so much?
Not particularly. I think actually this situation with COVID is probably the closest I've come, but in a very different way, in that I was made redundant just before this happened. I'm in the middle of interviews for a new role. And my redundancy meant that all of a sudden I had no routine. And I had none of the routine I have had for the last 5 years. Then I had my children at home all of a sudden, so I was overloading sensory-wise permanently. Yeah. Because I have one who's autistic, one who's a question mark on the spectrum or not. We had homeschooling to deal with. We had not being able to go anywhere or do any of my normal home routine either, to a point. Yeah. Shopping on Saturday and everything else. And that's actually caused me probably a bigger issue than the 20 years I had in work.
Yeah.
is
I guess
to
it just
not
depends
have
on
any.
your situation really at work, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think with work, I've always used it as a control mechanism. And we talk about masks and everything else. In some ways, work was my mask. Work was the thing that ensured I was doing what I was doing. This is who I am. This is what I define myself as. This is what my day looks like. And it structured me and organized me. And all of a sudden, to have that taken away completely has been a real challenge.
Yeah.
And it's something that I never even thought would be as much of a challenge as it was.
But do you think that, I mean, there have been a couple of questions about kind of like what are good jobs for autistic people and stuff like that. And like working in IT, that's very stereotypical, Naomi. I mean, like, you know, that is the stereotypical autistic.
I was a scuba instructor and a nanny originally, so I was other things.
Oh, really? Scuba instructor? That's interesting. Yeah, because obviously IT, that is almost always in an office environment, and typically nowadays they're open plan offices. Some people are talking about open plan offices, which are pretty awful. And hot desking as well. A lot of companies do that, which is like you can't even have your own stuff anymore. So sorry, what was I getting at? You know, for people who are not maybe in like traditional office environments.
I think the first thing to do with trying to find a job, because it's not necessarily IT, I mean, that's just my experience, is actually you need to understand who you are and what you want to do. Because I think if I went back 20 years ago with a diagnosis and knowing what I know now, I would have been in a completely different field. Is actually, and weirdly for me, it would probably be to do with people and communication.
But, well, not that weird now you're doing it.
No, totally.
But that's such a good point, though, because when I originally went to university, like I did psychology, I wanted to be a psychologist because I'm interested in psychology. And like, I never even thought, do I want to actually do the job of a psychologist? Do I want to go into an office or train with the NHS? Do I want to do this? And as soon as I realized what the job would look like on an everyday basis, it really wasn't that appealing to me anymore. So I think it's like you can be so interested in a subject, but the job might not suit you, you know?
Yeah. I think trying to find the right job and the right situation for you is so important. And I think part of that is down to knowing who you are, but obviously you have to have, you know, the people circumstantially. When I was 2021, I had to have a job. It was the only way I was going to survive life.
Yeah.
And you then cannot be picking and choosing at times, and that's a struggle in itself. And I think that's when you need to try to find the right job with the right people. And it's more about the people at that point. You need to do your research into if you're going to be getting a call center job, if you're going to be getting a retail job, if you're going to be getting any job that you fit. I think the challenge is also looking at the company, looking at their website, looking at the support around them, asking in other autistic groups if anyone has any experience of working for those employers, and actually trying to find the one that you know will be more supportive. Or, you know, that's what I'm doing at the moment. Actually, I'm looking around also at who the companies are, if they have neurodiversity structure in place, if they're open about it, if I think it's just a tick sheet on their web page versus actually they are interested. And trying to ensure that I'm going towards the right companies for me and the right situations for me. I think that's really important nowadays. Because
sorry, there was a super chat came in with a really interesting question. So let me just go and find it. I can't put it on the screen anymore because it disappeared. Any advice for autistic people stuck in non-autism friendly jobs like call center work or customer service? Do you want to go or shall I go first?
You go to start with, because I think I've covered a bit already.
I mean, like, I have never worked in a call center because that is literally hell on earth. But when I was a student, when I was younger, I did a lot of temp work. And basically I was on like the switchboards because that was all I could get and I needed the money. So, and so that was kind of like working in a call center. But well, my first ever job when I was 19, it was in a car showroom, and my desk was you know how car showrooms tend to be kind of round. My desk was actually in the middle.
Oh no,
and everybody else was around. I was this terrified 19-year-old or something. And they were like, okay, well, here's a phone. And you know, these phones, like, I know in the 90s, you know, they're like buttons everywhere, not user-friendly at all. And like, oh, this is Harold, this is Dave, this is also Dave. And I'm just like, and then it was the worst. So advice.
I spend my life going, I'm going to forget your name.
Yes. Okay. So that's something that I do is I try and talk through my thought process. So I'm upfront with people that I have difficulty with auditory processing. So I know they might be a bit like, okay, why are you working in the call center? But that's how I coped. I'm like, sorry, I have some difficulty hearing today or something. You could say like my ear is, I'm recovering from an ear infection. I don't know. That's terrible advice. I'm really sorry. But what I'm trying to say is like I was talking through my difficulties if I had them. So saying like I'm really bad with names, or I'm really bad with faces. Although in a call center that's maybe not so much. Or just also I found like part of my masking is being overly friendly and nice. And I don't think masking is all bad actually. If it helps you keep a job, it can be exhausting, but it does serve a purpose, and it's essential for some people to do. So I guess I kind of got through it and then just moved on to something something else as quick as I could. I'm sorry, that was a really bad answer. I started out really confident, like I've got experience, and I realized I had no help.
No, I think that's right. And I think, you know, being open about who you are doesn't necessarily mean saying you're autistic. Like exactly. I said, you know, you can turn around and say, I'm really rubbish with names. Yeah. Or I do forget names, you'll have to remind me. My poor husband, when he first met me, he used to ask me what people's names were at the bar, and I'd say, I'm going to the loo, can you introduce yourself and then tell me?
Oh my God, I do that.
I don't know them for 6 years or something stupid.
Yeah. I do that too. I'm like, can you do the social stuff for me, dear?
I think being aware of and self-aware of who you are, and again, we're back to support groups, we're back to talking to other people who are in a similar vein to you, because actually so much of my learning curve around who I am has come from the groups I'm in, when all of a sudden I go, oh, I do that too, and I didn't realize nobody else did.
Yeah, or I didn't realize that was an autism thing sometimes.
Yeah, totally. You know, and that's been so helpful in understanding myself better. Yeah. And trying to ensure that I am understanding why I'm doing things in workplaces and everything else in between. I think the other thing you have to remember is, especially with communication, is the pause that you are doing, and it's something from public speaking, is not as long as you think it is. So if you need extra thinking time, do be aware that you can pause for a few seconds more than you think to give yourself that time, but also learn to have a bank of key phrases and words that help you if you need more time, or extra questions for somebody that allow you to prod them for more information without necessarily saying, I have no idea what you're on about.
Yeah, exactly. So basically scripting, but that's scripting in a very helpful way. And actually that kind of, there's a comment from Voldemort again, saying about call centers, worth seeing whether you can transition as well. A friend in a call center transitioned to web chat, and that involves a lot less social nuance. She loved her job so much more when she didn't have to talk. And I think that's a great idea, because like I hate talking on the phone, and talking to customer service things is super stressful. But I had a web chat with, I don't know, I think it was with someone on a hosting for a domain or something like that. And I was like really like chatting away to this person. I had a great time, not as a customer, I mean. And then I was like, can I make it do a referral link for you to like get your stats up and your monthly stats? I don't know. What am I talking about anyway? But web chat is easier.
Web chat's amazing. I think I had a team member who I wasn't sure whether they were neurodiverse or not. I suspected they may have been, and they weren't talking about it. And one thing I did with my team was I actually, as a leader, had been through a leadership course that talked about different communication styles and different personalities and how different personalities talk to each other. For instance, one personality will be incredibly abrupt, and it's not because they are being abrupt, it is because that's the way their brain works.
Yeah.
Just like all of our brains work differently. And they just like getting straight to the point all the time.
Yeah.
And I rolled that training down to my team so they could start understanding each other. So those personality clashes started slowing down.
Yeah.
But also, so for instance, they could start understanding, actually, I communicate better on email, I communicate better via web chat, I am far better on a video chat myself. Yeah. I actually prefer face-to-face because I can pick up nuances and I can pick up body language. Yeah. Whereas if I'm on the phone or in chat, you'll find I use a huge amount of smileys and LOLs and everything else in between, purely because I'm trying to make sure that people aren't reading me as abrupt or they're not reading me as rude or anything else in between. I worry that the nuances of my speech is not coming across properly in text because I'm so animated normally when I talk, but also I have a really bad tendency to use a huge amount of sarcasm, and that can be translated badly depending on people's sense of humor. Yeah, I can be really terrible on that one. So yeah, I think I've totally lost track now with you as well. I've totally lost track on communication styles. Were we all?
Yes, communication styles. Yeah. I think though it all comes down to education of employers, education of HR, and like it's sort of like, I feel like in schools there's much more focus on this. Like it's treated, autism, neurodiversity is much more important, and then all of a sudden you're in the workplace and it's like, oh, autistic people getting bullied, that's not important because they're adults, they should have grown out of it. Or autistic people who have to stim, like why are you being so childish about it, you know? And so it's like, how, other than people like you and maybe people like me, how do we get this revolution going? How do we educate on a mass scale so it's not just certain companies?
It is this kind of talking. It's being open and honest and educating, which I know is a challenge for some people, because obviously being honest comes with its positives and its negatives about who you are. For instance, where I am at the moment, there's been a lot of interest in these conversations. We started them probably a year ago, and there's a huge amount of talk about it now within varying companies. There's a lot of adaptation going on. I think it's been quite interesting seeing how it has tumbled on and expanded, you know, because it's a bit like those diagrams you see of one person. It's a bit like the COVID diagrams, really.
Well, it's all mathematics, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, and it starts going up. So I think that's part of it. I think also what's been interesting is I've had some people from schools attending some of my talks. And that's been really good to see, because it means that the educational side of things are now looking at their neurodiverse children, almost adults,
young adults
within school, and how to help them with working and how to help them find the next job. I had a lot of questions from somebody on that who was a careers advisor. And I think that's been really interesting to see. And I think it's something I want to pursue when I've got a bit more ability to do so, is actually communicating with my children's schools, with other schools, and seeing what else I can do for them to understand more. Because of course they are very good at, or some of them are very good at, additional needs, neurodiversity, everything else in between within the school system. Actually showing those children who are within mainstream schools as opposed to specialist provision is actually a challenge in itself, because of course they're just being thrown out into the world, to university or just straight into work. And a university was probably going to have the extended facility to help them support, where a workplace won't do. And all of a sudden they're just going to end up landing in the workspace with possibly no support. And that's a whole new version of things, but it's also the beginnings of their journey, and therefore the beginning of that workplace's journey. And I think actually that's a very good time to start.
Absolutely. You know? So just carrying on with, you know, whose responsibility it is to educate themselves, talking about kind of corporate or company responsibility. Obviously you can, everybody can educate themselves for free on the internet, but
then
they don't.
Interesting at best, because it depends on where you land.
Well, yes, exactly. But in terms of, provisions, it costs companies to make accommodations often, depending on what they are. But, it can cost them in time, effort, or just expense. So how can companies see the benefits, and how can they better serve the needs of the autistic population without kind of getting into this, but it's going to cost so much kind of mentality? Like, how do you get people to see the value without just, I guess there's a balance, isn't there? Without saying autistic people are so great, they're good at this, this, and this, and then but they also need all this support. So how do you present that to companies to get that balance right?
I think it depends on the company and what they are trying to achieve. I think it depends on if they are putting a neurodiversity program in place, for instance, because there's two very different versions here. There's a company who's hiring a person who's come to them for a job, or there's a company who are actually putting a neurodiversity program in place, which actually means they are investing money, they are investing time, which is a very different scenario. I think for those companies who are having an employee, a couple of employees, however it goes, I think the first thing is to actually talk to the employee. I think actually having the opinion of the person who needs the support and the voice of the person who needs the support is actually paramount. I think it's the most important thing. I think the HR side of things, hopefully from what I've seen, there is a lot more discussion within the HR community about this at the moment.
Okay.
I have seen quite a bit going on within my side of things anyway. And therefore, if you have a good HR department, they will be asking you. If you don't, you should probably go and prod them with a stick and tell them about you. If you don't have that confidence level, I'd be suggesting possibly talking to a peer who can help you with it. Again, we're back to that side of things. I think finding the right information to send them for you. I actually, for my boss, I put together a huge pool of pictograms and memes because it was the things that actually I relate to best. I shared the entire lot with him, so he all of a sudden got 120 pictures of what I thought about life.
That's probably the most autistic thing I've heard all day. But I actually do agree that I think that memes, I think autistic people are very into memes more than the average person, maybe. I don't know. I have some friends that who that we sort of very exclusively communicate in memes, and it's sometimes easier than putting things into words. So that's actually not a bad idea.
It sounds daft, but actually it worked for me because it gave him all of the ones that related to me, all the ones that I communicated about and everything else between that I wanted to explain to him. And in a way, he could look through them at his own time as opposed to me going, right, I'm going to tell you everything, information dump. Which is also the challenge.
But the challenge, of course, for employers is that autistic people are so different. So with the best of intentions, they can learn about autism. They can go to the National Autistic Society and they can learn about what autism is like. And then you meet someone else and you're like, oh, I don't need that accommodation, And the thing is, though, okay, some people are not very good people, but a lot of people do really want to try. And they get it wrong. And you're just like, I don't need that, but thanks. So how do you deal with that, trying to tell people that we're all different and no, I don't need this particular accommodation, but I might need something that you might think is weird?
Memes.
More memes.
More memes. I think the most important thing, actually, from my point of view, was trying to explain the specifics to me, but also ensuring that I wasn't getting offended, which was a challenge in itself when people pigeonholed me instantly. When I turned around and said, oh, I'm autistic. And I mean, I had it with a doctor who I had a whole conversation about my son. We got to the end of the conversation and I said, oh, and I'm autistic, by the way, I don't know if that has any bearing on anything. And he then decided to write down every dose I needed to give my son of this medicine, what time it was meant to be at, and everything else in between. I just looked at him and went, I can handle all of that.
But some autistic people might not be able to.
No, totally. But it was more a case of saying to him, look, if I need provision, I will ask it. But also, we need to be able to actually be open to say, I don't need the support, but also add on to that, but somebody else might do, because you are right. That is possibly somebody else's challenge.
Yeah.
And to make sure that we are explaining that autism is a spectrum, and make sure we're explaining, one of my biggest ones, and I always try and do it, is to talk about it. The diagnosis process is a flower. Sounds really daft, but you'll have seen it's a meme again.
Yeah, I was going to say, you need to make a meme.
Where you've got autism in the middle, and then you have ADHD, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have all of the additional pieces. And I use that to explain to people that when they are talking, and I hate the language, so apologies, high functioning, low functioning, all of these words I don't like, it is because what you are doing is you're looking at autism and adding on all of these petals on the flower, depending on the person's diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing for people to learn, that actually autism itself is the communication condition. And then all the additional pieces make up that person and their diagnosis.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot pigeonhole somebody into purely you're autistic, because that actually has no bearing on what that person's experience is.
Yeah.
You know, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I suspect it's not diagnosed. I have APD, I suspect it's not diagnosed. You know,
what's APD?
Audio processing disorder.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I struggle massively.
I'm like APD, I'm proving a point here, aren't I?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, if I'm talking to somebody and I can't see their mouth properly, all of a sudden I can really struggle to communicate, especially in a noisy room, because I hear everything at the same level.
Yeah.
So nothing ever fades into the background. So you stick me in an open plan office with somebody, the minute they cover their mouths, I have no idea what that person's saying at all.
Yeah.
Interestingly, as a sidebar, my husband put a mask on for the first time. I totally freaked out, because all of a sudden I couldn't see his face, and it really freaked me out, and I had to look at his eyes. Yeah. And I'd never realized how much I was focusing here, as opposed to eye contact. I never even realized. And yeah, I had quite a violent physical reaction to turning around and going, I can't take it. Take it off. Take it off.
Yeah, but I totally understand the whole... I don't necessarily lip read, but I definitely use people's mouths as cues to help me understand and help process. I mean, when I have the TV on, for example, I had subtitles on everything, not just things that are poorly, you know, the audio is poor, badly edited. And so it's just, oh, sorry, I've got something. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. But yeah, I get that. And this is the thing, open plan offices, and a lot of bosses are like, oh no, I don't want you wearing headphones, because I think a lot of the objections they have to accommodations for autistic people are based on a kind of slippery slope idea. So it's like, well, if we let you wear headphones, everybody's going to want to wear headphones, and then chaos ensues. I
think the challenge is in what environment you're working in, and therefore their reasoning for it. And people who are old school versus people who are new school. Yeah. Because, for instance, working in IT, where we had a call center, they didn't want the guys on the call center wearing their headphones, because it meant they couldn't interact with each other. And therefore, if somebody was having an issue that they didn't understand the answer to, they could then speak to the next person along, or other people could hear it, listen in, and help each other. Yeah. And I think that was the challenge they were finding, is that they didn't want them to be using their headphones, because they felt that it was stopping team communication. Yeah. But similarly, actually understanding that you could do that in a group chat, for instance. Yeah. You've got that. I used to throw my entire team into a chat window together, and insist on them talking to each other in there at times. Partly because I had a team in India, I had a team in the UK, I had people in different places. And it was the one way to ensure that actually they were all asking each other questions, as opposed to asking me questions cheerfully all the time, when actually somebody else knew the answer.
But this is an interesting idea of, like, it's sometimes, you know, we do have kind of, what's it called? You know, outside the box thinking. Like, well, we can't help but think outside the box. And sometimes those are the solutions that actually will help everyone, because having a group chat, for example, that's not just going to benefit the autistic person, that's going to benefit everyone, because instead of being able to just ask the person next to you, you can ask the whole team. Like, maybe the person next to you doesn't know the answer, but the whole team, somebody might. So that's kind of like, a lot of these things I do think will benefit everyone.
I think it's back to that conversation we had earlier about communication styles, and it's something I'll try and find some links for you, because it taught me so much about how different people communicate, and therefore how I should tailor my communication for them. But again, as a leader, it's being open. My team knew, now I'm not with them anymore, but my team knew that I was always there to soundboard off. And but simultaneously, if I had my headphones on or everything else between, they'd contact me on Messenger, so they wouldn't interrupt me, because I may be in the middle of a thought process that if they interrupt me, I'm losing half an hour's worth of thought process.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that side of things, and also ensuring that you're using the people around you at times as a tool, for want of a better term, not to be rude about other people around me.
Anyway, so what's the next topic? So there've been a few comments, like way back, I can't put them on the screen, about recruitment. Sorry, my hand's too much, flipping it around. Recruitment process and interviews, not being able to get to the interview process. I mean, the recruitment process, we were talking about this before, it's kind of peak neurotypical. It's a bit like dating, isn't it? It's like there's a lot of unwritten rules. There's a lot of like flirting. I think somebody likened recruitment to flirting. It's like you have to know what not to say and what to say, and nobody tells you actually these rules, but everyone else can work it out, and then we're stuck there going, why am I not getting any interviews? So what are your thoughts on like recruitment and that whole process?
It's something I've been talking to people about off and on, is how to change that process to make it more accessible, to make it so it isn't as old school as it always has been, because recruitment hasn't changed in years. And my first experience of things changing slightly was actually going down to visit a company in London who sent me an email that had an attachment that had a visual guide to where I was going. And it showed me, this is the tube station exit. This is the road outside. This is the front door of our building. These are the people you may meet. This is the stairwell. And I hadn't realized actually how helpful that was to me, because at the end of the day, I generally don't have a huge amount of challenges over that piece of the equation. But actually, it took my anxiety away quite considerably in actually just having that visual reference. It was fairly interesting for me. And it's something I speak to a lot of companies about, is actually it just took the anxiety away from going to that interview in the first place. And that one small tiny change helped enormously. I think the differences at the moment are we're now having video chat interviews. My interviews are now at the moment on audio or whatever else between. That in itself produces a whole set of challenges.
Yes.
I think there should be a couple of different ways of interviewing. I think it depends very much on what you're talking about. I think you need to have almost a process of a multi-answer question set that allows you to answer the questions without having that face-to-face, without having somebody in your face talking at you. So it allows you the time to process. So, for instance, if you're in retail, it can be a selection of questions on how you'd handle a customer or customer service, but you don't have to actually communicate that verbally at that point in time. You can actually think it through and have a thought process around it. I think that would be a very good way of doing it. I think part of the HR and recruitment process should be asking how people communicate and what their best way of communicating is.
Because that's the thing, even if sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Even if you work in retail and you, in that situation, you might react the appropriate way or the correct way. Reacting in that way is completely different from being able to tell the interviewer immediately how you would react. So those are two different skills, even though they sound like they're related. But having somebody say, okay, well, a customer comes up with a bad item and they want to return it, but it's not your policy or something like that. How would you react in that? And if you're good at your job and you're in retail, you might just do that. But suddenly being asked, oh, how would I come up with that? And it's a verbal problem, not a situational problem, isn't it? All of a sudden.
I had it with interviews, technical interviews especially, is that when asked a technical question, I could have sat in front of a computer and done what they were asking me to do, but I couldn't verbalize it.
Yeah. And it's even like people. I have that problem too. And I'm sitting here chatting for an hour on the internet, like doing interviews. That's fine. But then somebody asks me a question that I'm not expecting, or that is difficult in those high pressure situations. And I struggle to verbalize in that way. Yeah. So the verbal thing, the kind of, it's not really situational mutism or selective mutism, but it's definitely like, there are some situations where you cannot shut me up, pretty much like on my YouTube channel. And there are some situations where I can't say anything. Yeah. And that's pretty much,
I have the same problem. You know. I do have the same issue. I find that when I have that issue, somebody was just saying meetings are so hard, and I totally agree. What will happen is I'll go through a meeting and I'll come out the other side, and half a day later go, oh, I really should have put that point forward. I really should have said that.
Yeah.
And what I generally do at that point nowadays is I put in an email and then send it out to the people who are in the meeting, attending the meeting, obviously not for an interview process, but for meetings at work, and actually just follow it up with, I know we talked about this, this, and this, and have you thought about this? Because it occurred to me later on. And I'm just really open about the fact that, oh, I've thought about this after the fact, you know, because I know that with a mix of me being a bit ADHD at times and all over the place to a sort, so, you know, I am, and I haven't been diagnosed, but I know I am. And also the fact that the thought will occur to be due to my processing time a day later if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
But actually it's very important that I get my input there and I have my voice heard in a boardroom, in a meeting, because if I don't, and it's back to being a diversity unicorn as a female in tech as well at a leadership level, I have to have that voice heard. I can't be the one sitting back, and I can't be the one going, oh, well, I forgot to say it, so I won't. You know, I'm very open, I'm very forthright, and like I say, I'm in a good position to be able to turn around to people and go, I'm autistic, deal with it, and you're going to listen to my opinion whether you like it or not.
And I think it's important for the autistic people who kind of like do have voices to like put themselves out there. I don't want to say to speak for other autistic people or speak on their behalf. That's kind of like not what I'm getting at, but just so that, you know, people are used to hearing autistic voices. So like the people who are confident and who do have the privilege or who have that experience, you know, if we can, I mean, I say that like I am so confident. I'm not really, but if we can use our voices and not just to talk about ourselves, but to raise the topic of autism, and so people get used to hearing about it, they start to understand more about it. Then we can say, okay, well, not everybody's like me. Some people can't talk at all in a group setting. Some people will freeze up if they get talked to. I used to be like that at school. If a teacher asked me a question, I wouldn't be able to say anything.
I find also taking a pad and paper and a pen into an interview, and I've had people interview with me who have done this, and I have not even blinked. And it means that what they're doing is they're writing down the question as I'm saying it, or the key points of it, and therefore they can look at their notes and process. And you know, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I've had people saying, could you just give me a few moments to have a think about the answer? And I have no issue with them doing that, because I understand, and you have to remember, anyone interviewing you will understand that an interview is stressful, and an interview does bring out your nerves and everything else between. And therefore, be aware also on the flip side of you're nervous, but the person interviewing does understand that. They will understand, and therefore, if you want some more time for things, they should be able to give it to you. And I think that's also important in itself. Even if you're not disclosing, you can take, you know, just piece of paper. Different people communicate in different ways, and that's not an issue in the slightest. And I've, you know, had interviews with varying different people who have either taken a piece of paper and a pen. I had one guy bring in a whole sheet of notes with him. And you know, I don't have an issue with that. I think you do what you need to make sure you get through the interview. And actually, I, as an interviewer, would find that admirable, because it shows that they understand themselves well enough to know what they need.
Yeah. But you're probably a kind of special kind of interviewer. Like,
yeah,
you know, I don't think many are like you. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'm odd.
That's not what I said.
I'm individual.
Yes, we're all individuals.
But no, I think knowing yourself and preparing for those basic questions is really helpful.
But how do you deal with the kind of like what I was talking about, the peak neurotypical process? How do you deal with the unwritten rules of the unemployment dance that maybe you don't even understand now? Like if you were younger and you weren't diagnosed and you're trying to go through all this, like how do you work out what to say when you aren't sure what they're really asking you?
I think there are a couple of different things. Could you elaborate on that? Is always a good. We're back to stock phrases again. You know, could you give me a real life example? Is another wonderful phrase that you can use to give yourself a bit more time. Mm-hmm. I really should probably put a lot of this down in paper at some point. You and I have to remember to do this.
Well, it's being recorded, so you can go back and watch it.
Because actually it's quite helpful to have those key phrases, and we should probably set up a group or something that actually allows everyone to share key phrases, because there will be some that I haven't thought of and other people haven't thought of, and they're quite handy to actually allow you to bide some time to understand the question further. You know, I think that's a really good thing to do. And if you do have a few of those in your head ready to go, from my point of view, if I was going to do that, I'd have to read them about 3 minutes before I went in, because my recall's so terrible that actually if I'd read them the day before, there's no chance of me remembering them. Yeah. You know, but again, it's being aware of who you are and how you handle things.
Yeah. And I think that's also something that's very difficult, because especially if you've masked a lot in your life, like sometimes you actually don't know who you are.
I have no idea.
You don't know what will help you. And so it's really, I found a lot of value actually in the groups that we're a part of, you know, like talking to other autistic people, or just even lurking and like listening to other autistic people and being like, oh, maybe I should try that. Maybe that will help. And like, I've never been, because I can't remember them, I've never been one for stock phrases, but I definitely went through a phase where I was trying to, I actually worked in the careers department for about 10 months. And so like, I learned the theory behind how to get jobs and everything, like the interviewing. I learned all the theory, and I still couldn't do it. that makes you feel really, really bad about yourself when you like, there is no reason why I'm so bad at this. But I think it's important to remember that we're not actually bad at things. It's the process that is not set up for our kind of...
Process is not designed for us. I think you also have to remember, percentage-wise, when you think you are doing really badly, you have to remember that actually a percentage of that is confidence levels, and therefore you should actually ignore that entirely. Because I had an interview recently. I had my first interview for something 2 weeks ago. I thought it had gone abysmally, yet I got a second interview instantly. And I thought it had gone horrendously. And I think part of it is, for anybody, not just autistic, but neurotypical as well, is actually throwing caution to the wind and going, you know what, I'm going to be me. Again, not saying diagnosis or anything else in between. I am me. I am just going to get on with this. I find sometimes actually interviewing where you don't want the job, or pretending you don't want the job to a point, is actually a really good way of doing it, because I tend to succeed better when I don't want a job. When I've gone, you know what, sod it, I don't care.
There's less pressure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think that's quite a good way of doing it. I mean, I don't know when I'm masking, when I'm not. I really don't, because after 37 years before diagnosis, I still have no idea. I could still sit here and realise things from the groups we chat in and everything else and go, oh, I didn't realise I did that.
Yeah, and I think it's also like, it's important to remember that you started masking for a reason. And for me, it was very much like, I see the reaction, I see how people react around me to people who are different, people who do that. So I won't do that. You know, there was someone at my school who was bullied. I was not bullied at school because the way that I masked was to make myself completely invisible.
Yeah, I was, you see, I really was. And
you were what? Sorry?
I was bullied at school, and somebody was actually earlier talking about bullying in the workplace. And it's something I experienced before my diagnosis, which meant that the way I handled it was not how I would now. You know, back then I kind of just dealt with it, curled up in a ball, metaphorically speaking, and sort of put my head down and just kept going.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, I think I'd probably handle it very differently. But again,
well, you start to believe the things that people tell you about yourself, because it's not just the bullies who say those things. It's kind of society, isn't it? Like society makes you feel like you're wrong. So when people bully you, it's almost like you think, well, they've got a point or something. Like, so you really internalize it. And I think that's why it's so hard for us.
My husband is still working with me on stopping me apologizing for everything. I still now apologize permanently for everything. Even, you know, he could drop a glass and smash it and I'd say, I'm really sorry.
I know. I'm actually working on that with emails, because emails are really a weakness of mine. And I apologize if any of the viewers have ever sent me an email I haven't responded to, because now I get too many. I literally just can't. And but so there are lots of emails that I put off because I can't work out how to do them, and I put them off, and then it's embarrassing amount of time later. But I've stopped myself apologizing, and instead of apologizing, I've started saying thank you for your patience. And do you know what? It doesn't just make a difference to them. It actually makes me feel less crap about myself, because it's not like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm make up some lies or whatever. Everything's so, it's like, thank you for your patience. I am acknowledging that this is late, but I'm not making myself feel bad about it, because I don't need to feel any worse. You know,
you don't need to apologize to somebody for not communicating in a time. You're communicating in the time frame you are able to do so in.
Yeah. And sometimes that time frame is 6 weeks, but I'm also autistic, and okay, I don't care how many people say how high functioning I am. Sometimes I'm not.
Stop using that term.
But no, I'm saying, like, I am not. It becomes very obvious to people when they try and communicate with me on that kind of a level that sometimes I am, you know.
I put something on the bottom of my emails on my signature that says, I will be getting back to you as soon as I can do, but please bear with me. You know, because actually that means that they don't start chasing you ad nauseum, and they don't start really hassling you for answers. The one or two people who have done that have generally got the short end of my conversation, and I've sat there going, well, I will come back to you when I'm ready. Thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, the good thing is that so much is now being done online as opposed to not face to face. But it's weird. I would have expected more phone calls, but actually everybody wants to see you. So video chats are kind of like all right for me. Like, they're okay, certainly with people that I like, you know. It's just people I don't like. I don't want to talk to. But it's interesting how the current situation has kind of shifted what is possible all of a sudden. All these accommodations that were not possible, now everybody needs them. Suddenly we can all work from home. We can't, but you know, all of this stuff is being set up for the neurotypical majority. And
I think it'll be interesting to see the world moving forward after this, because accommodation is going to be a completely different word, I think, from it was 4 months ago to now. Because companies have had to learn that actually to drop those shackles of the old school, and that everything doesn't have to revolve around the office instantly. And that's been quite interesting. What has also been interesting, though, is I think we're going to see more and more working from home. And I think it means that actually, if we can get the HR process changed, the workplace may well become a far better environment, or more accommodating environment to us who are autistic. Because, for instance, I'm already hearing about companies who are looking at dropping real estate and having people work from home because they've realized about the financial savings they can have. So there are definitely people who are already looking at their workforce, or the majority of it, working from home as opposed to in the office, which really will change things. But it will also, in the longer term, I think, change the global outlook for jobs as well, because all of a sudden you could have people working on different continents, all communicating via chat, via web, via email,
Yeah.
and working on the same team, and it opens up a hugely different marketplace at that point for jobs, which will be really interesting. I think that's a longer term view, not a short term view.
And I think it's also it's right now we have a great opportunity. I mean, like, people like you have a great opportunity to say, like, okay, we don't have to go back to the way things was. We can move forward, and you can see. Remember that time we all worked from home for 4 months?
Why can't we still do it?
Yeah, exactly. Or why can't these people still do it? So it's kind of like an interesting opportunity that we could capitalize on. Capitalize is maybe the wrong word, but
I think
strike while the iron is hot.
I think it is the right word. I think it's something that companies now can't hide behind not helping and not being accommodating. Yeah. Because it's been proven it works. It's been proven they can do it because they've had to do it. Yeah. And I think that'll make a huge difference, to be honest.
I mean, places like Oxford University. I think Oxford University announced that for the whole year they're going to have stuff available online.
Yeah,
and totally. Then I mean, disabled students there have been asking for these accommodations for years. I can't imagine how annoyed they must be, quite frankly.
I think we've got to bear in mind, though, that what has happened, for instance, at the university, what has happened with some of these companies is the shift they have done. Actually, there will be a huge cost to the company. It's been done very quickly, but they have, if you think about the university, for instance, all of a sudden, the reason they are able to do it is all of their lectures are now online. Yeah. To set that up has been, I suspect the IT people in the background have had a hideous time over the last 3.5 4 months.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
The company I worked for actually was fairly well prepared for this because they had something called business continuity set up because they were a 24/7 operation. Yeah. Everybody used a laptop. So we'd already put in place this kind of eventuality. So everyone literally just went home and worked. Yeah. But the majority of companies, universities, and everything else will not have had something like that planned. They wouldn't have had pandemic training put in, set up, put in place. So much as, yes, it is possible, I think it's actually been a very good thing. It's had to give them a short, sharp shock to do it all. And the expenses to the business will have been fairly horrendous depending on the business. But going forward, it'll be fantastic for all of us. Yeah. But I don't think we can necessarily be angry at them for not putting it in place at the beginning of things, because I think it takes an adjustment of understanding. And it was coming with some companies. There were definitely the younger companies, the startups, the younger tech companies all had this in place and were already doing this. Yeah. It's the more old school, like you say, the universities and things. And I think for them to shift their entire workload to online actually has been very impressive, to be honest, to be able to do it in this time and to be able to get all of those lectures set up, because at the end of the day, you're going to be talking to some people who are very technical, and you've got a whole bunch of users who wouldn't have a clue about how to even turn their computer on at home. Yeah. Never mind do an online lecture. And actually, that in itself has been probably a huge challenge. But now it's there, and there's no going back from it, which I think is going to be the most amazing thing for all of us. Yeah. But with that comes its own challenges, like I was saying earlier about things like communication styles. People who have always been in the office, who are extroverts, who like talking to people, all of a sudden will be very isolated. And they will be struggling to cope with work all of a sudden. Whereas those of us who like sitting at home cheerfully on the sofa, curled up in a ball, working, will be very happy.
With a dog on you.
I'm not here. And I think that's actually important to recognise as well, that much as it will make us very happy, it may actually cause challenges to other people. And we've got to start looking at how we accommodate the workforce as a whole through that transition as well. Yeah. And to ensure that everybody is working together, they're able to work together. Relationships don't break down because they don't have the day-to-day silly conversations about how your cat's doing or what your dog's up to or any of the daft things. I used to bring my team biscuits on a regular basis as motivation. All of a sudden, I can't be giving them biscuits every week.
Memes. You can give them memes.
How am I motivating my team if I can't feed them? So there's a whole in the opposite direction, there's a whole challenge in itself for this as well that has to be taken into accommodation from a neurotypical as well as an autistic perspective.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's a very complicated subject, because not only you're trying to make your workforce happy, well, hopefully they are, but you're trying to make all kinds of autistic people happy, and you know, all kinds of ADHD people happy, and it's
and
just
dyslexics and dyspraxics and everybody else.
It's so complicated and it's so difficult. But I guess the important thing is that they try, and that we try to go forward. We try to educate as much as we can without being like, well, this is how it is for me, so this is how it should be for everyone.
It's that balance. It is that balance of understand, and it's something that I see in some of the groups at times, is that it's back to communication, understanding other people's opinions and seeing other people's thoughts and how they're feeling about it. And this is something that can be a challenge at times, is actually seeing both sides of the story. And I think because of my late diagnosis, I'm probably in a good position with that in some ways, purely because I've had to work both sides of the coin, and my diagnosis came so late on that I'm now understanding myself. I've done so much research into it all, but actually I know what it was like beforehand, and I know that side as well, which has been quite interesting. And I'm in a position where I see the business needs as well, which is also different. And I think sometimes businesses don't necessarily explain why. It's a bit like parenting. It's you say, no, you can't, but you don't explain why you can't. And actually that's important as well as a business, to elaborate not only on, no, you can't work from home, but the reasons why, to make sure they make sense for that person. And that person understands why, because otherwise there's going to be resentment.
Exactly. You know?
It's a bit like the headset scenario. You can't wear a headset. Why can't I wear a headset? Because other people in the team need to talk to you and da-da-da-da-da. But if you don't have that extra phrase, you know, you're just saying, no, you can't, without actually explaining it. And that in itself is parenting, you know? Leadership is parenting.
Parenting is leadership. I mean, the thing is, I actually parent kind of like that. I know some parents who are just like, no, you can't. And you know, my kids like, I want to watch TV, and I'm like, you know, we can't watch TV all the time, because it sets a very dangerous precedent, and you will be reduced to, you know, like, so I'm that kind of parent, apparently, which I didn't know.
Parenting, just as a heads up, my two have just walked in the front door, so I may get interrupted.
That's fine. I think we have, we've got through a lot today, and you obviously, like, we have so much more to talk about, but I mean, it's 4:30. I'm gonna need to start thinking about parenting myself and dinner and, you know, all these things. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been really great to talk to you, and I hope it has been helpful for the viewers. I
feel there's so much more we could talk about as well. I mean, please put my email address up for them all so they can ask me questions directly if you want.
I will. I'll go back. If you send me those links to your contacts and your email address, I will put the description box, or, you know, if somebody wants to private message me, I can. If you want to know, then look in the description box for this video here, and that's where it's going to be posted. And what else am I going to say? Yeah, we've got a couple of weeks. We've got a video on interviews where I'll be talking to a woman from a recruitment agency for autistic people. She set that up, and it's very cool. So we're going to be diving in specifically to the kind of the interview stuff. So yeah, I have started the important topic. I've jumped in, and we'll see what people are interested in from here.
There's so much more of it as well. It's huge.
There's so much more.
And such a favourite topic of mine.
And of course, if you have any questions, the live chat's going to go off as soon as we go off. But if you comment on the actual video, once the video is kind of like processed, you can ask comments there, and I will try and have a look at them, and I'll try and answer them as well. So thank you, Naomi, for coming on, and thank you everybody for watching. Hope you have a great Saturday. You can still see how much energy I have because I'm not doing it at like 9 o'clock at night. So I'm like, woo, I'm so energetic now. This is the ADHD kind of like traits coming out. So yeah, take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. End the broadcast.